Good evening and welcome to the August 13th Winston-Salem Forsyth County Board of Education meeting. I am Shay Woodbury, your board chair, and I appreciate your attendance tonight. And also, we say good evening to our viewers on Cable 2. Will you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and also stay standing as we do our invocation. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's bow our heads. We are thankful for the time we have together tonight. May we all start a new year by putting our kids first, and all of us work together for the betterment as a team for our school system. Thank you for all coming, and thank you for all the support that you give our school system. Amen.
Our next order of business is the agenda review. I think we need to amend our agenda tonight, and if I can get a motion to amend the agenda to add 2 action items, the 2019-20 budget update, and also the 2019-20 teacher supplement schedule option A.
I second.
Any discussion or question?
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
think it's just the one action item, this teacher supplement schedule is already an action item, it's just the
Okay.
evaluation budget.
Okay. So, we just need to amend the agenda to add the one additional action item, the 2019-20 budget update. Is there a motion?
Motion to amend.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Our next order of business is the public comments on agenda items only. At this time, we will hear public comments on the agenda items. Please know we reserve this time to hear comments only on the items that are on tonight's agenda, either for action or discussion. Direct your comments to me as the chair, and know that while we are not able to respond, I may direct you to a staff member that can answer a question when appropriate. We do ask that you be respectful, kind, and know we cannot talk about sensitive and private student or personnel information in this public setting. While we hope it doesn't, should the comments become personal attacks, contentious, or otherwise disruptive, I reserve the right to end the comment period. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and if you have more to share, always know that you can email us directly. The first person we have this evening is Ms. Val Young.
Good evening, Chairperson
Good
Woodbury, Dr. Simonton, and the board. I am not Rhonda May, school social worker. I am Val Young, elementary educator, and now the full release president of Forsyth County Association of Educators.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I rise to speak about the supplement schedule. We want to thank you and acknowledge that it's been hard work for you, and we know that. And we appreciate the forward movement, but we have an ask too. We thank Dr. Simonton for his ask to the county commissioner, but our ask is that we see some forward movement for our classified staff. They have worked hard, and we haven't seen substantial movement for them. So none of us can say that we don't appreciate the money that teachers may get, but we do want to see money for our classified staff, because they are the ones that touch our children when they come in the morning. They're the ones that feed our children. They comfort our children. So we need them to be paid on a level that, I know we don't have the money that they're worth, but on a level that they can live above the poverty line. So we ask that you look forward, you look for money for our classified staff, and we appreciate all that you do. And we'll be here to be part of that conversation if you need us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rhonda Mays.
Good evening, Chairwoman Woodbury, the
Good evening.
board, and Dr. Simonton. I am Rhonda Mays, a school social worker, speaking as an individual this evening. I wanted to speak about the budget as well as the supplement. We know we're currently at a standstill with our state budget. And we know that is a major issue because no one is going to see a change in their salary at this time. So now we're looking to our board to make certain that a change is seen. And we need a change for everyone. You know, we talked about the teacher supplement and about the progress that's being made in that area, but we cannot forget about our classified, our education support professionals, because it takes all of us working together in order to make our district successful for our students. We can't say we're gonna give only this number of people a pay increase. Because you know what? When we go to the store, when we look at the price of items, it's not a price, okay, if you're certified and licensed, you pay this price. If you're classified, you pay this price. No, we all have to pay the same price for the goods and services that we get. I'm asking that you please continue to make certain that we have a plan in place where we can attract and retain all educators at every level. Because we know the consistency makes the difference with our students as well. When you have people who don't have relationships with our students, that's a problem. And when you have a relationship with the students, students know that they can trust you. Students feel like they are being respected and cared for. Then they are more likely to be attentive and sit down and learn. We want to retain and attract educators who have a heart for children and who have a heart for everything that they're doing, whatever position they're working in our district. Please continue to move forward on making certain every educator in our district receives a pay increase this coming school year. Thank you in advance.
Thank you. Julie Magnus.
Good evening. I'm Julie Magnus. I'm a third grade teacher at Diggs Latham Elementary School, and I am here to speak to you. I was a little bit disappointed that maybe there weren't any questions about the Wiley addition from the board during the Building and Grounds Committee. I'm here to speak to you about stormwater and the impacts that the Winston-Salem-Forsyth County plans have for their property that currently blends with Haynes Park. More accurately, future plans that will no longer blend with Haynes Park. Well over a year ago, Winston-Salem-Forsyth County presented a concept drawing to the city stormwater and erosion control department. That particular concept drawing would have required a full flood study, which might have required a conditional letter of map revision issued by FEMA. Why? Due to developmental activities in the floodplain, pure and simple. A large portion of Haynes Park is in the 100-year floodplain, and we have had multiple 100-year storms within the past 100 years. So that time frame is a failed estimation on the number of times the floodplain has been underwater. Stormwater controls for the new construction are not expected to meet the 100-year. They're only expected to meet the 25-year floodplain, which means you've always got extra waters that are not required to be controlled that are going into Haynes, into the creek. Okay, we already know that all of the ballparks down there, the walking trails, the baseball trails, they've been underwater. The tennis courts have been underwater. The potential impact for building a stadium in this area might end up being very detrimental to what we already have down there run by the school. So what I'm really wondering is Wiley getting the absolute best gym addition that they can, because we're pushing it up as close to the street as we can in order to potentially accommodate this stadium down the road. Michael West, the principal at Weston STEMIS Architects, said that the biggest challenge in working on the designs was the fact that there's not a lot of area to build the addition. It's a very tight site, West said. We didn't have much leeway in any direction. I have to ask, is Wiley going to be compromised in order to look at fitting a stadium in the future? Is Winston-Salem-Forsyth County Schools being fiscally responsible to build a Wiley addition whose concept plan is compromised by the amount of land it must fit in? I think the board needs to question its legacy on paving the way for a stadium at Haynes Park. Brunson's in a floodplain. It can't reasonably be rebuilt at its current location, nor is there room for it on school property at Haynes Park. Water is a powerful force that we cannot hope to control, and I suggest that it will have the last laugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Magnus. What I will say, as you're going back, is that I know that your focus was on the Wiley edition, and then you kind of tied it into also the stadium. I would ask folk to make sure that they are focused in specifically on the items that were discussed specifically in those committee meetings, so that we don't, so that we just stay clear of what the agenda is asking us to do. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Al Jabbar.
Well, you know, I'm walking up here for a reason like this. I was told that the school board is cold up there. But I'm telling you, we freezing out here.
Darrell Walker. Thank you, Mr. Jabbar.
Good evening, Chair Lady Woodbury, Co-Chair Ms. Burke, the rest of the school board. It's delightful to see you here on a summer breeze. I want to talk a little bit about the choice program, and I want to talk about what has happened as a result of the choice program. And this is why we're trying to unravel all this at this point. The choice program has resegregated our schools. I think everybody up here can agree to that. What has happened is our parents was misled to think that choice was going to be to their advantage. But what we did was we zoned all poor schools in one zone, expecting our kids to have the same opportunity as kids that's in affluent neighborhoods. So the question now, and I was in a meeting, and I constantly talk with most of you about things that's happening with our kids in our community, and I just don't understand why we don't see this for what it is. It's all about race. That's the bottom, that's the top thing about what this is about. There were people who did not want their kids that's in affluent neighborhoods to have some of our poor kids go to their schools. So they have made a conscious effort to make sure that this does not happen. Now, this board, in some way, matter, shape, or form, is gonna have to revisit this choice program, even to the point of possibly eliminating it, so that we can give all children the same opportunity to a valued education in Forsyth County School District. I thank you for all that you do, all that you participate in. I want to thank all of you who come out to the schools. It is so important that you come out and let the principal and the teachers and the kids see your faces. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. The next speaker is Barbara. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. If not, you can correct me. Gatto. Gatto. Okay. Sorry.
Hi, my name is Barbara Gatto. I'm a parent of a Paisley student, and I'm here to represent the group on behalf of Hate out of Winston-Salem.
So let me say this, Ms. Gatto, correct? So I think you were going to have some conversation as it relates to
Possibly the culture?
the climate culture. See,
Yes, ma'am.
so we did not have that discussion in the last committee meeting. So
Okay.
what I can do is put your name in the public comments for
That'll be
general.
fine.
Thank you.
I'll be here.
Okay. Next, we have Anna Goodman.
I'm here to speak about the Wiley gym design, and I'm gonna keep my comments tightly focused on Wiley.
Thank you.
I understand what you were saying before. You guys are considering a design for Wiley Middle School Edition that has been drawn to make space for another project that is not yet funded. It faces a lot of challenges and it might not ever be built. So before we make compromises in the design of Wiley Gym, we do need to examine that other project and make sure, find out if it's even viable, because a lot of stuff says it's not, and we're postponing that discussion till after we make these compromises in the Wiley Gym design. The addition is being sited much closer than otherwise necessary to Northwest Boulevard. It would eliminate the school's side yard and seriously limit safe pedestrian routes for students at drop-off and pickup times. I think this has been discussed. It needs to be discussed in comparison with, I mean, the gym design as planned is definitely better than the old gym. We all agree it's an improvement. But the design currently on the books needs to be compared with the possibilities that would open up for Wiley and student safety if we didn't have to design it to make space for another project that might not ever be built. The Wiley addition is ready to proceed, and we just can't let it be compromised or held back by this giant thing that I'm not going to say what it is, but anybody that looks at this, and this was missing, I noticed from your board books, the slide that shows the other project. But even if you don't show this slide, the design, this explains why it shows so close up to the street. And if you don't have to make that compromise, you shouldn't make that compromise, and we should at least find out if the other project is funded, if it's even gonna happen, before Wiley students pay the price. And at least figure out what you're giving up in the Wiley gym design by making this allowance for the other project that's not funded. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Elizabeth Coyne.
Hello,
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you for asking. I wanted to come up here to reiterate that no one in our community disputes that the Wiley Gym is outdated and due for improvements. The location of the gym entry below the school's main level requires a circuitous ramp to provide access for students with disabilities that is a long route and is uncovered. Understandably, this is why the ramp was a focus of past complaints. I enthusiastically support any direction to center the focus of Wiley's gym design for improving access for students with disabilities. And I hope that that direction is supported. Providing equitable access and inclusion, that is the unobstructed entrance into or the involvement and full participation of students within these schools, its programs and activities is a key component of educational equity that I fully support. However, although I wish to honor your request, Madam Woodbury,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I do feel that we need to be honest. Transparency requires honesty. And the discussion of this Wiley project began as at the request or suggestion of a private group when they pledged to fully fund the construction of a stadium for R.J. Reynolds High School.
So, Ms. Coyne,
Yes, ma'am.
what I would ask is that you kind of stay focused on the Wiley Gym and your concerns about that.
I want to make sure I get my time.
Okay, I'll give them back to you. I just wanted us to be clear about making sure you're able to say what you need to say, focused on the Wiley Gym piece and not on something else.
Right.
Just to be fair to everybody who have tried to stay focused on what I've asked.
I agree with the call for clarity and focus. And my intent here is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
we remain focused on students with disabilities
Yes.
and center the students with disabilities in this project, and that they be the focus of this project. Because if that's what's been explained
Yeah.
to me, and I support that, and I ask you to focus that
Yes,
on
ma'am.
them. But I want to review the fact that this group requested this project. And that is what is causing this to be a priority at this point. It was requested to be included on the 2016 bond. We know this to be the case. And I think that's undisputable. We know that to be the case. The project,
So are you going back to that project, or you gonna stay with the Wiley piece? So I'm just trying to work with you, Ms. Coyne, and it's kind of, it might be kind of frustrating to you because you want to get out what you're trying to get out, but we just have to try to, maintain the order of what we're trying to accomplish. So whatever information you have about the Wiley Gym, we are definitely interested in your staying focused on that issue. And I understand there may be some perceptions about how it's connected to other projects, but if we could just deal with your concerns about the Wiley Gym, that would, be most helpful. Your time has lapsed, but I know I've probably taken about 20 seconds, so if somebody can put maybe 20 more seconds, and I'll let you finish your comments about the Wiley
if we
Gym.
could do 30 seconds.
Okay, I'll give you 30.
30 seconds.
And we'll focus on Wiley Gym, though.
And I appreciate you acknowledging that there is frustration here.
Okay.
There's immense frustration,
Okay.
actually, within the community.
Yeah.
There is the pretense that there's a private stadium that's fully funded. It is not fully funded.
Okay.
And that there is a public process here, but there is undue access to the school board members by a private group that is impacting our public bond project. And the inclusion of the plans, the stadium plans on the Wiley Addition plan
Thank you, Ms. Coyne. I appreciate it.
underscores that students with disability needs are not at the center of this design.
Thank you,
And
Ms.
you need to
Coyne.
be honest about that.
Thank
And
you.
not misappropriate access and
Ms.
not
Coyne, thank you.
exploit the
We
ADA
got-
as a fundraising tool.
Thank you. Katie Sonnen Lee.
Oh, my goodness.
Can I have the 2 extra minutes? I'm asking the chair, but.
Let's see how far you get with the 3 minutes, and then we'll.
All right. Good evening, board members, Dr. Symington. I'm here tonight to speak as an individual about the SRO contracts that are on the agenda and the way that schools approach discipline in Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. As I was going through the board book and prep for this meeting, I was shocked by how much money the district is spending on SROs. More than $2.1 million is going to the Sheriff's Office and Kernersville Police Department. That's for 24 SROs and a number of school positions and supervisory positions. When I ran the math on the salary and benefits for staff to serve students' needs, we could hire more than 40 social workers or counselors with $2.1 million. We could give a lot of supplements to the staff that Rhonda talked about. And that includes salary and benefits. 40. The other things we have to remember about having SROs in our school is that currently they are there primarily dealing with student behavior and discipline. They're not being police, they're being principals. I know that many in the community are shaken up by the relentless gun violence in our country, including me. However, if SROs are busy dealing with student discipline, they're not able to protect students and educators from outsiders. Instead, they're often part of the school-to-prison pipeline, diverting students from the classroom to courts and detention centers. In our state, about 40% of juvenile justice system cases are referred by schools. In Forsyth County, that's even higher. It's almost half. And we know from research that those referrals disproportionately fall on the backs of Black students and brown students and boys and students with learning differences or developmental or intellectual disabilities. But here's the kicker. Only 8% of school-based referrals to juvenile court are serious offenses. Only 8. The rest are minor and nonviolent offenses like yelling at a teacher, stealing someone's backpack. We have to take a long, hard look at whether our discipline and SRO system is fixing problems or creating them. Are we pushing kids to learn from mistakes and excel in school? Or are we pushing them into the criminal justice system where recidivism rates and the likelihood of a permanent criminal record are high? We must also remember the fear, trauma, and anxiety that having a constant police presence in a place of learning carries with it. For students or parents that are undocumented, I think about those kids in Mississippi last week. For parents with some unpaid speeding tickets and maybe have a warrant out for their arrest. I've had a speeding ticket. I know some of you, none of you have ever had one, I'm sure. For kids whose life experience has just taught them that law enforcement is not always there to help them in their community. If we're gonna have SROs in our schools, we need some clear guidelines about when law enforcement becomes involved, and it should only be for the most serious or dangerous crimes like possession of a weapon, serious assault, rape, kidnapping. There's part of the contract that lists about 10 crimes. But it should not be for being disobedient, yelling, or taking someone's things. That's just regular kid stuff. That's how kids learn and grow. People use the tools that they have around them. If people have tools for punishment and exclusion, that's what they're gonna use. If people have tools for support, learning, and therapy, then that is how they're likely to respond. We need to surround our students with people who are equipped to respond restoratively instead of people who are equipped with punitive measures like criminal charges. I urge you to reconsider how the district uses and funds SROs and how the district uses and funds research-backed strategies for helping students through the tumultuous times of being a kid and being a teenager. Growing up is hard to do. Let's not make it harder. Yesterday, the governor's office announced the School Justice Partnership Toolkit and support for all school systems to implement an SJP with local law enforcement. In Georgia, where school justice partnerships were first implemented in 2004, the county has seen an 83% decrease in the number of referrals to the court system and a 24% increase in graduation rates. A 24% increase in graduation rates. In New Hanover County in North Carolina, where Wilmington is, they've seen a 67% decrease in school-based referrals. Forsyth County had a kickoff event over a year ago for a school justice partnership, but there's been very little news about it. I'd like the school board to get community input on the SJP, especially from students and families who've been affected by school-based referrals and SROs. In addition, I think it's important for the school systems to provide updates throughout the year about the progress around the SJP implementation. With the SRO contract in front of you tonight and the announcement from the governor yesterday, you have an opportunity to show the community what kind of district you're building. How will you support our students, schools, and communities as a board? Thanks for my 2 minutes.
Thank you. You just used like an extra minute, I think. Our next order of business is the discussion items. First, we have the driver's education contract to the North Carolina Driving School by Greg Gentry.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you? I appreciate it. Chairwoman Woodbury, Dr. Simonton, and school board. Every few years, we're required to request for proposal for driver's education instruction. And the proposed contract is for the North Carolina Driving School to be subcontracted to provide instructors for the classroom phase and also for the behind-the-wheel phase of our instruction. This is required by the state, and the North Carolina Driving School will be responsible for the instruction for 30 hours in the classroom and then an additional 6 hours of behind-the-wheel training. They are also responsible for all the scheduling for the students, and they'll be responsible for all the paperwork and records and upkeep of that situation. This is a state-funded program, and all the unused funds at the end of the fiscal year would have to be returned back to the state. Is there any questions?
Nope.
That was nice. All righty.
Thank you.
You very much.
Our next discussion item is the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce contract. Dr. Simonton.
Good evening, Ms. Woodbury, members of the board. Tonight, we wanted to bring to the board recommendation to continue a longstanding partnership with the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce. For nearly 20 years, the district has partnered with the Chamber of Commerce around several services that are vital to the interests of the district. The current, or the most recent contract with the Chamber of Commerce expired on June 30. After some extended negotiations, the board would like to continue a one-year contract with the Chamber of Commerce around services that are identified in the contract that are in your materials. In particular, one of those vital services are the services around volunteer services. We know that volunteers play a pivotal role in the schools, community volunteers, parents, business partners. So all of those working together help us to execute the goals for the district. We know that the partnership with the Chamber of Commerce helps us to identify lots of volunteers. The work that the Chamber does helps us to coordinate with the school-based volunteer coordinators, and Ms. Jennifer Cobb has been exceptional in that work. One of the other services that is provided by the Chamber has to do with a service called Senior Academy. Since we've had cohort graduation rate, Senior Academy has been in existence at a high level. More than 92% of those students each year graduate. These are students who need all courses to graduate from high school. You know that one of the district goals is to get to a 90% graduation rate. So the efforts of the Chamber to partner with several schools in the district, with volunteers in the community, again, help us to do that. Some of the other services around partners in education, as well as services directly to students around career fairs, field trips, partnering with several departments in our district, help to get to some of the other goals and priorities that we have. So as identified in your materials, we'll get to the action item, but you can see that we're asking to continue with the services that have been in existence in the previous contract for the upcoming school year, 2019-20, with a review of those services, a consideration by district staff and the Chamber of Commerce to look at how we could continue the partnership in the 2021 school year and after. Pleased that tonight, Mr. Mark Owen, who's the Executive Director, Chief Executive Officer for the Chamber, and Ms. Rodessa Mitchell, who's the Vice President for Education, are here. And we're pleased that they're here, and we're pleased with that partnership. I'll be happy to take any questions if you have any.
I would just like to thank board members Kaplan and Calvert Hayes for their work with the Chamber contract. So we really appreciate their leadership in this effort. Are there any other questions any board members may have about the contract? All right. The next discussion item is the 2019-20 teacher supplement schedule. Dr. Simonton.
So the next three items we're going to do together. We're going to look at the continuation budget, and I'll just get right into this PowerPoint. Let's go back. We're going to do briefly a quick review of the update on the state budget, the local budget, the teacher supplement, and the quarter-cent sales tax. Earlier today at Finance Committee, and I won't do Ms. Kaplan's report, but Frida Lashman was here. She's unable to be here tonight. The state budget update is around a few items. The first one has to do with anticipated conference committee and approval of the budget. It's anticipated that principals will receive increases in the range of 3.2% to over 6%. The tiers by which principals have been paid, there's been an extension of that. So there's a tier from 200 to 400. Previously that was kind of 0 to 400. And then at the upper level, that tiers has expanded from a max of 300 to more than 1,600 students, and ADM is average daily membership. So principal pay is based on how many students are in the building. Assistant principals are paid based on their teacher credential plus an additional 19%. And so those are the proposals for school-based administrators. For teachers, these are some averaged out information for you. So for teachers who are at steps 1 through 15, they are going to receive a 1,000 annual step increase if they're employed full-time. So current starting salary is $35,000. Step 16 through 20, 1% average. Steps 21 through 24, 3% average. And you can see the rest. In past salary adjustments, there have been few increases for teachers who are beyond 25. For instructional support, and those are positions like counselors, social workers, and psychologists, the school counselors have previously been paid on a teacher scale, but they also have master's degrees, so they had a 10% increase. They will have their own scale, and you'll see that the new salary schedule is increase of $80 per month above the teacher pay plan. The projection for non-licensed employees is a salary increase of 1%. So everybody else will get a 1% projected increase. Some of the other things that are in this budget, employer-provided benefits are increasing. The retirement match increases to 19, almost 20%. You can see what that number was in 18-19, is up about 1%. Health insurance increases slightly as well, so increasing costs impacts the state budget as well as the local budget. One of the new things that's coming out of the state budget is an allotment to teachers. Schools and districts have traditionally gotten an allotment for instructional supplies, and the General Assembly is slated to provide $150 to each teacher through something called the class wallet. So teachers will have this. It will be totally at their discretion. There will be a process by which they can request these supplies, and the schools will continue to receive pretty much the same allocation that they received previously for instructional supplies. The next section of this presentation is about the local budget. In May, we made presentations to the county commissioners, and the commissioners approved the county budget ordinance. Part of that budget request to the county commissioners included something called an alternate service level request, and that alternate service level request was not approved, resulting in a shortfall in local funding. So one of the things tonight for your consideration is how do we bridge the gap between that shortfall, $4.1 million. As we also consider that, you are also going to take action on the proposed SRO contract, and if approved as recommended, an additional $150,000. The items for your consideration to balance the budget include a reduced projection on salary increase. The original budget allowed for a certain percentage increase for salaries based on the conference budget. We anticipate that the actual cost for those salary increases will be lower, and we believe that will be $800,000 lower. We have, from our operations and maintenance departments, they have identified additional cuts of $500,000. We also believe that our earlier estimate around our transportation efficiency that has to do with our buses and the routes and what happens with those, that amount believe we can also reduce another $800,000. There is a one-time state fines and forfeitures revenue source that is a range, and the number that we feel comfortable with proposing to you tonight is $829,456. That's a revenue source. Again, that helps us to balance the budget. We have an allotment out of at-risk funding, and we're requesting that we reduce that amount by $100,000. That's a 10% reduction. And we're also looking at a very important piece, but one that we are working on a plan with our technology department, which is a teacher laptop refresh. And that amount is almost $1.3 million. Those items total will get us to a balanced budget. Any questions about the state budget or the local budget?
I have a question about the SRO contract. the increased money. From my understanding, it would be $150,000 extra for us this year, but the increased number of personnel being requested by the sheriff's department is not covered by that $150,000. So there are other personnel that will go under the sheriff's department budget. Is that a permanent expense they're willing to take on? Or is that one that is a one-time, a one-year commitment?
So I want to be clear, I understand your question. So the additional $150,000 would cover the request from the sheriff's department to add additional officers at the schools that are going to be.
So it would cover all the additional officers they wanted to add?
Correct.
So how many additional officers do they?
So for the high schools that we're going to partner with the sheriff's department, we will now have 2 SRO officers, and there are also supervisors included in that amount.
I may be misremembering the conversation we've had previously about this, but I thought that the 150 was for about 3 of those positions, and that the sheriff's department would take on the additional expense for 1 year only of many of those positions. Because if we're talking about all the high schools having 2 SROs, plus supervising roving positions, that's not covered by $150,000.
The majority of the expense of this $150,000 are requests to accommodate the additional officers. So where we're adding Parkland and West Forsyth for coverage with the sheriff's department. So currently, they have no officers in those schools, so they're going to add 2 at Parkland and 2 at Glenn, and 1 at the middle schools that they're going to go to.
And they're planning on paying for those permanently.
Those are included in the contract that we are proposing to you.
And so that's not a 1-year contract, that's a permanent, they are taking on that expense long-term?
We are.
So this is my concern. We're doing cuts now because we couldn't meet our budget. And some of these issues are really critical that they get in next year's budget. My concern is that something that looks like $150,000 is actually quite a bit more than that once we assume the full cost of that program. And so it's kind of putting into our budget for next year much more than $150,000. If I remember, it was something like $400,000 will be what it will have to be in next year's budget.
I don't know if we have an estimate of next year's, but the real dollars are just $150,000.
No, for this year.
Yes.
I was thinking that the special meeting we had, maybe in June, that's not just one contract, that's overall SRO cost, is what I was thinking, and that we had some reduction with the Winston-Salem Police Department because some of their costs went down, and so it was just $150 extra for all of our contracts. And that's the way I interpreted that information, is that it was just $150 more that we were spending. $150,000 more that we were spending, but it was not. Because we lost, because
right.
The Winston-Salem contract went down just because the sheriff's department's contract went up, but overall, it was just $150,000 more.
But, and again, it was several months ago when we had this conversation, and so I don't have the memory I once had, admittedly. What I understood was going from 1 SRO in the high schools to 2 SROs in the high schools. And again, as Ms. Sonnenly very eloquently discussed, the contract for SROs is not actually to protect the schools, it's to police the students. And the language is very clear in that contract. The sheriff's department The Kernersville Police, the Winston-Salem Police, whoever it is who polices, has a requirement to protect the schools, and that is their job and not our job. Their job is to police, and their job is to police the schools regardless of how many SROs are or are not in the building. And so my concern about the increased cost of SROs is first, indeed, the philosophical argument about putting 2 SROs in a school does not make the school safer as far as school shootings goes or in terms of the protection of the building. It merely adds people to police our students.
So if I can clarify for Ms. Jones, you're correct on the net 150,000. It is what you described.
And what I will add to, Elizabeth, just to bring us back to the date that we had that special meeting, I think the sheriff's office was very clear about national standards. When there are over 2,000 children in a building, that national standards say that there should be more than one SRO office, and they were going from that recommendation. And I think, too, the sheriff's office was clear that if they're there and if something happens, then they're going to, in addition, protect and secure that school, although they are there for support for the school as a student resource officer. But if something happens, they will go into mode of protecting, securing, whatever they need to do from a law enforcement agent, perspective. I get the philosophies behind the more SRO officers you have in school, then that breeds ground for a school to prison pipeline. But I feel comfortable with the mindset of this sheriff and all the work that the sheriff department is doing to make sure that there is a different mindset in going in to protect and serve and mentor with our students. So again, I respect the differences of opinion, but I think that if we're going to, with due diligence, protect our schools in the manner that they should be protected according to national standards, that we follow the recommendation of the sheriff of Forsyth County.
So I am so sorry that I missed the meeting in June.
I think you were there because I think you had that concern.
Well,
then.
I brought up a lot of questions around these concerns.
Yeah.
I certainly did, and I did bring up the contract as it is written, and as it is written, it does not talk about protecting schools.
But they do, because sometimes
Right, I
crimes are
understand,
committed
but
against students.
I understand that, and I'm not saying they're not, but what I'm suggesting is that as the board is learning, what's in writing supersedes what we expect to be true. And so I think it's really important to be clear about that. My concern in that whole conversation was that the sheriffs of Forsyth County, their department was going to be taking on paying for some of these positions for this coming up year only, but that after that, it would be reverting back to the district. And so if I'm misremembering that, I apologize.
I think you meant, well, so Elizabeth, I think that you are remembering something correct, because the sheriff department did pick up the tab for this school year, but not for the upcoming school year.
So we're talking about a projected new liability next year by moving, no. No.
So I think the 2 positions that you're talking about are additional officers for the 18-19 school year at Reagan and West Forsyth.
Yes.
So the sheriff's department did
Okay.
pick up those
Yeah.
costs.
All right, but there are the 150,000 is what it's going to be requested for the 2021 school year as well. There's not going to be an increased cost. That's my concern. Are we making a new norm that we will then be paying for in the future? That's what I'm concerned about. The other thing I would like to talk about national standards is if we're concerned about national standards, we are so off on national standards for school counselors and school nurses that it is obscene. We are not talking about a 1 to 2. We are talking about massive, massive lack of those positions by true national standards, and the Sheriff's Department national standards, because I did look them up, indeed said this is a recommendation, not a requirement. And the requirements for counselors, for nurses, for support personnel, we have not met as a district, and we have not come close to meeting.
So you have the two actual concerns, of one being the cost and the second being the wording of the contract.
Yeah, as far as this particular action item, I am very concerned that the contract does not talk about the protection of buildings, although the community, the board, believes that that is in the contracts. In the language, it's not there. And until it's there, then it's not in the contract. And I think it's really important to hold people to what is said in writing versus what is assumed to be true. And over, that's where problems come up, is when the assumption about what I think is in the contract actually is not there in writing. I always go for what's in writing. My other concern is that we are increasing a liability for the district based on what I believe is an erroneous assumption, which is that more SROs in high schools makes the schools safer. And that is not the role as it is written in the contracts.
So Dion, is it possible that we can add a line to the contract that states something about, about safety in the school or protection in the school?
So maybe I would ask Ms. Motzinger what language you would like to see, because when you look at pages 3 and 4 of the contract where it talks about the duties and responsibilities of the SRO, to your point about it doesn't say that they will secure the buildings, it says they would provide security and law enforcement for the school for which the SRO is assigned during the school day, to enforce state and local criminal laws and ordinances, and to assist with the enforcement of those board policies, to investigate criminal activity committed on school property, et cetera, to actively patrol the school buildings and the school grounds and act swiftly when it comes to criminal offenses that occur on the school property. So,
So what I am concerned about is that when people think of school resource officers in buildings, and I think the number one big concern people have is what happens with an active shooter. What happens with an active shooter is, and there's good research on this, that it takes a massive influx of law enforcement to take down somebody. You're not going to be able to get SROs in a building if you say in the contract you are required to go after an active shooter yourself. But I think that's the assumption people have.
I think that, again, Elizabeth, what I would say, maybe you should have a conversation with the sheriff, because it is Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough's strong recommendation that we adjust for the safety of our students. And I think that, and I think anybody in the community should, if they have those concerns, talk to him about his recommendation. I think that because my expertise is in education, I'm not going to question the sheriff of the county when it comes to his recommendation and expertise about securing not just our schools, but our entire population in the county. So I'm just going by the recommendation of
What I would hope then, while we're doing that we are going by the experts of people who work in our district about the requirement for nurses and psychologists and social workers. And when we take that seriously, then I will take the other recommendations as seriously as well.
Are there any, go ahead, Dr. Simonton.
Are there any other questions about the state or local budget? So next we will talk about the teacher supplement. Also, in May, the county commissioners approved a $3.7 million appropriation for 2019-20. We are appreciative to the county commissioners for providing these dollars to support the district and the community and teachers in particular. The board received materials around what the teacher supplements look like for the top 20 districts in North Carolina, some statistics around the top 5 districts, including Guilford and Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, and then some general notes around some of those information. So we'll cover these pretty quickly. The next slide lists the top 20 districts. Wake County is the top district in the state for average teacher supplement. Their average teacher supplement is $8,720. This is based on November 2018 data. And Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools is number 20. 4,251. You can see the top 5: Wake, Chapel Hill, Carborough, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, Durham, Orange. Some of the information to consider for the board is how we ranked. Already mentioned the average supplement. And one of the things to note is the dollars that are provided to you for your consideration are just the dollars for what teachers actually received. There's another 26.51% that are benefits, but added to the total cost of teacher supplements. So the $3.7 million, all of those dollars don't go directly to teachers. Some of it is salaries. The third bullet you'll see there says that basically the districts that are right above us, 19 through 13, are really less than 10% higher than us, and applying the $3.7 million would allow the district to go past almost 10 districts in our quest to be in the top 5. And that's a huge jump. It's important for us to take a look at that and consider. The last bullet on this page essentially says that it takes $12 million. It would take $12 million if nothing changed. And we know that, for example, Wake County already has an increase, although Wake County is substantially higher than the other districts in the state. It would take $12 million for the district, Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, to climb into the top 5 in the state. The other things to consider are that many of the districts, the second bullet on this slide, many of the districts in the top 20, they tie their teacher supplement to the state salary schedule. The next slide here talks about what the implications for that are. And so a local board who ties their teacher supplement to state salary schedule also commits to increasing the teacher supplement whenever the state raises the salaries, and that might be not so necessarily independent of the district's ability to raise those supplements. One of the other things that stands out as it relates to our supplement schedule is that in the first 15 steps, in those districts that are in the top 20, we are way behind. And as an example, if you just use Guilford, and Guilford is not in the top 10, but a first-year teacher in Guilford, their teacher supplement schedule on a monthly basis is $550. In Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools, the teacher, that is $260. So that's more than twice the difference. And so one of the things as the board considers how to use this 3.7 or apply this 3.7 is what is your philosophical position about how to apply the monies? So for your consideration, there are some options. There are lots of options. There are 3 options that we presented to you. We talked about these. Option A is an across-the-board dollar increase to all teachers. Essentially, you take the 3.7, you divide it by the number of teachers, you come up with an amount of money that each teacher receives. Option B and C are related but not the same, but the option B is, as it was mentioned before, in the first 15 steps, we are way behind the top tier districts. So do a 50% supplement increase for teachers in the first 15 steps. If you just, again, use the example of Forsyth and Guilford, teachers at step 0, if you increase the supplement for teachers at step 0 by 50%, from 260, 50% would be 390. We would still be behind Guilford, but it would increase our competitiveness. Option C is also looks at increasing the supplement for entry steps to be competitive. The main difference between B and C is a more even distribution of the dollars. Each of these has pros and cons. The recommendation to you is to do option A in this particular year. Philosophically, we have talked about how to recruit teachers and be competitive across the region and be competitive for the best teachers. In my opinion, in the current window of time, because we have missed the recruitment period, the option A affords every teacher in the district an increase in their teacher supplement. Any questions about their teacher supplement information or the recommendation?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to be clear that the community understood that this 2019-20 teacher supplement schedule is good for this 1 year, and that it does not progress into the 2020-2021 year.
Okay, yes, so the board would have discretion to update the teacher supplement schedule as it does each year. The last item for discussion is a quarter-cent sales tax. The commissioners also approved, and this is language from the county budget ordinance that was passed in May. It essentially reads, and I'll read it, the county commissioners have agreed to facilitate the necessary action items to hold an Article 46 sales tax referendum in March 2020 with the intention of using proceeds from a successful referendum for education purposes to include enhancing the teacher supplement. So whereas the $3.7 million is exclusively for teacher supplements, there's a little more general language in this quarter-cent sales tax for the board to consider. So the discussion around the quarter-cent sales tax is that the board has to decide how to craft language to share back to the county commissioners. And so some of the pertinent information is there. The sales tax, the referendum will go on the ballot for a March 2020 timeframe. It's estimated that it would generate $13 million and it would be effective July 1, 2020. The board would have to make a formal request to the county commissioners. There are briefings that the county commissioners have periodically, so at the time that the board makes that resolution, we would then provide that back to the county commissioners. And likewise, we have to do the same thing for the supplement information per the direction of the county commissioners. Are there any questions?
I don't think we have any. The next discussion item, there are no questions or comments. I'll move to the next discussion item, which is the Climate, Culture, and Equity Special Committee Report. Board Member Deanna Kaplan.
The Climate, Culture, and Equity Special Committee Report briefly met on August 5th at 6 p.m. Dr. Symington updated us on the Equity Director position and said that he would make a recommendation to the board for approval. David Sisk summarized our previous work on defining equity. Dion Jenkins discussed the equity policy process and offered to write a policy for our review with the information that we had provided thus far. We decided to wait on crafting an equity policy until all members reviewed the Coalition for Equity policy. Dr. Roseborough will send out to all members. I think she already has. It was decided that at our next meeting, we will have a more in-depth discussion from all members to create the equity policy with the additional information provided from the Coalition for Equity. Meeting was adjourned.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments? The next discussion item is the School Choice Special Committee Report. Board Member Andrea Bramer.
So the School Choice Committee met yesterday at 5 p.m. We had two things that were on the agenda. Homana Tashbar gave us a middle school review on the assignment versus the enrollment. Then Dr. Symington presented a poll result of those board members that completed the poll of what we thought was important, and the number one was content and magnets. We had amended the agenda to include a questionnaire that's going to go out to the community. We contracted with Forsyth Futures, whom we're very grateful for to reach out to the community and find out what's important to you for choice. And so we expect that to come in the next several months. It's an ongoing timeline that we will proceed with. It was a contract, and we applied for a grant with the Winston-Salem Foundation, and they approved the grant, which we are eternally grateful for again. Outstanding is that we will create a timeline and provide that back to you. We will go over magnet programs, and we'll go over some data that was provided to us by North Carolina State ORED, which is the Operations Research and Education Lab. We adjourned the meeting, and we will meet again on September 9th. Please expect that some community members will be invited to join as advisories, and we will be reaching out to businesses and to social groups. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Board Member Bramer, did we mention that Forsyth Futures had given us the grant? Okay, I zoned out, I guess.
Yes, we did.
Sorry.
Forsyth Futures is doing the questionnaire, and we're going to do the timeline with them. And Winston-Salem Foundation actually filed a grant to pay for the contract, and they granted us that grant because we're using an equity lens, and we're very, very pleased with both organizations.
Yes, and thank you, appreciate that. The next discussion item is the Buildings and Grounds Committee report with Board Member Leah Crowley.
Is it finance?
Or
Is
do you
it
want to do
finance?
finance? I'm sorry, I skipped
Okay, that's
you.
okay.
The Finance Committee report with Board Member, again, Deanna Kaplan.
The Finance Committee met today at 4 o'clock. As you saw in the PowerPoint presentation, Frida Lashschmidt updated us on the 2019-2020 state budget, and Dr. Symington and Frida Lashschmidt discussed the local continuation budget and ways to balance it, and discussed the SRO contract. Dr. Symington and Frida Lashschmidt discussed the 2019-2020 teacher supplement and the three options for this money. Option A for this year was Dr. Symington's recommendation. Dr. Symington and Frida discussed the quarter-cent sales tax, and we will have a special called Finance Committee meeting on August 20th to talk about this further and discuss a formal resolution to present to the county commissioners. I requested an amendment to the agenda to include an action item to vote on the recommendations to balance the local continuation budget, and to vote on option A for teacher supplements to go to the full board for a vote this evening. We voted to approve the recommendations to go to the board for the vote tonight. Meeting was adjourned.
Madam Chair, could I also just recognize Kerry Crutchfield for the work that he did on much of the teacher supplements schedule, so just want to make sure that we recognize him.
Absolutely. We appreciate you coming back to continue to work with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. So thank you for your service. And while we're doing this shout-out period, I would like to thank Layla Garms with the Winston-Salem Foundation for her hard work to continue to enable us to do so many great things here in our school district. So the next discussion item is the Buildings and Grounds Committee report by Board Member Leah Crowley.
Thank you. We had our meeting today at 5. We started with discussion. Colin Moore updated us on Conoke Elementary. The furniture is on site. The technology goes live next week, and we have a temporary certificate of occupancy. So school will start in that building the first day of school as things get finished up. There'll be some dedication and ribbon cutting ceremonies upcoming. And some board members got to tour it, was that yesterday? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yesterday, so it's looking good. Lawrence and Paisley Middle Schools is even further along and will be fully operational by the end of next week. And the old Paisley building will be demoed around November 2019. And both projects are currently within budget, so that's also good news. For the Wiley design that we looked at, we approved that tonight at Buildings and Grounds. We had a community meeting in mid-July where we got some good feedback. And just to clarify with some concerns that speakers had earlier, the design, it is in a tight space, there's no doubt about that. The design is driven more by the geography there than any other thing. It's on a hillside. And also as far as one speaker said that the merit of the project isn't in dispute, and that is correct. That project met all the criteria to be included on the 2016 bond. We also had some brief discussion about Ashley. We are still working on a property for that, but we're dependent on another government agency and them putting it on their agenda. And a couple upcoming projects at North Forsyth. That one might be in need of starting early because they have concrete canopies that are now failing, that were in the bond project that was part of going to be replaced, and so this might happen ahead of schedule due to the safety issue. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Our next order of business is the action items. The first item is to consider approval of the driver's education contract to the North Carolina driving schools. Their motion.
I'll motion.
A second. Any discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce contract.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, motion carries. The next item is the approval of the 2019-20 teacher supplement schedule, option A.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the consider the amendment to Kernersville Police Department School Resource Officer contract for 2019-2020. Is there a motion to consider?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. Second.
Discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Did I skip what? Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm abstaining.
So the, item D, consider approval of Wiley Middle School addition schematic plans.
Second.
Discussion or question? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so is this, you being opposed?
I'm opposed, and so
Okay.
is nothing.
Okay. Motion carries. Did we get the amendment to the Kernersville, or did we go back to? Did we? Okay, so we on to F. Thank you, Elizabeth. Consider approval of school resource officer contract with Forsyth County Sheriff's Department.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next item is consider approval of the Hill Learning Center contract.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is consider approval of the contract with FCAE for president's salary reimbursement.
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion or question? It's my pleasure to do this. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, motion carries. The next item is to consider approval of the lease agreement for the Renoldo Church at Glen High School.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion or question?
I did have a question.
Okay.
Where does the rental fee money go to?
If I'm correct, looking at Darrell Walker, I believe it goes into like a general operations account, but there's a portion that goes back to the school to cover custodial supplies and other things that need to be replenished.
Okay, thank you.
Is that right, Darrell? Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item, well, no, I have one more. The next item is to consider approval of the lease agreement for Rescue House Church at Parkland IB High School.
Second.
Any discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The last item is to consider approval of the 2019-20 budget proposal.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or question? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next order of business is the consent agenda items. We have 3, the approval of the meeting minutes for June 25th, 2019, approval of special called meeting minutes for August 7th, 2019, and approval of general personnel report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Okay. It's unanimous. The next order of business is our meeting open to, of course, the public. Before we begin this section, I would just like to say good evening to our viewers on Channel 2 and thank them for watching. This will conclude our broadcast. At this time, we open up the meeting to
Thank you for joining us on your school channel, Cable 2.